Hello, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed what you've been hearing so far from let me turn on this slide over here so you can see me better. And hello, we're going to work on where I'm going to present and kind of round out the session is on something called LOTI, Levels of Technology Integration. Has anybody ever heard of this scale before? Nope, y'all, it's new to you. Dr. Christopher Mersch invented this a few years back. Nope. All right, so we're going to go back to the early, what is this century, 21st century? Are we in 20? It's 21st century, right? Okay, so the first time I learned about this was sometime around 2001, back when Michelle and I were first basically going around training people on technology. And there was a lot of initial funding, E-rate funding, and funding to basically get technology in the hands of teachers and students. Just the very first wave of funding that attempted to be connected to the internet and try to have a lot more in-depth funding with teachers. The issue was that there wasn't really much in the ways of talking about technology. And I thought it was appropriate for us to talk about this in this particular time, especially since I've noticed that every new generation of teachers that comes up has either their new skills that they bring to technology, but also they don't necessarily have a structure with which how to talk about technology. We all know how to talk about, say, reading. When we talk about reading instruction, we think about decoding. We think about decoding phonics skills. We talk a lot about comprehension skills. We have a whole slew of skills that we can talk about. Same thing with all of the standards around all of the things that we do in science, history, etc., but not so much about how we can talk to each other and students as to how we bring technology into the classroom. And I think right now, as we're in this new era of bringing technology into the classroom with a new tool, that it's a good time to kind of step back and look at a way that we can all have a similar language about how we talk about technology in the classroom. And that's really what LOTI is about. And Michelle, I've become the old man. There goes.
There you go. Yeah, hit present, and then there's the purple button on the bottom.
There we go. See, I've become the old man. All right. So levels of technology integration, LOTI. It's what it's when we refer to LOTI, that's what it stands for. It came this gentleman, named Dr. Chris Mersch, Moersch, came up with this somewhere around 20 years ago, probably a little bit longer. And it was a way for teachers and educators in general to talk around technology. So he created these levels of technology integration. And as we're going through this, I want you to think about the Bloom's taxonomy and how these are parallel to that. So I'm going to go straight into the levels. Level 0 is non-use. I don't think anybody is at this place anymore where you walk into a classroom and it's just the technology is not being used. I haven't seen this in a while. Show of hands, do any of your colleagues or anybody that you know of are still at this level where they're just not using it? Where it's a dusty computer in the back, or there's a real hesitance to use the technology? Anybody's in that place still? Thumbs down. You can do thumbs down or say nope.
No. Yeah. No, they've come like certainly unwillingly, reluctantly, but they're definitely there, especially after the pandemic when Chromebooks are like required.
Yeah, we basically had no choice at that point, but to all jump in. So COVID really forced everybody to jump in. So nobody's here at non-use, which is a good thing. Level 1 is awareness, that the teachers are really aware of the technology, but they're using it only sporadically. They only use it to show videos. They only use it to have like some whiteboards, which nobody really has. Well, some people still have interactive whiteboards, but there's not a lot of They're just aware of it. That's really what's just called awareness. It's the lowest level of integration that teachers know about it. Again, I don't think that anybody's here, really. I really don't think that anybody's at a level 1 awareness anymore. It just wasn't, it's just no longer the case. But if we go, now we go to the next piece, which is level 2, exploration. Yes, here, this I think is where people are, there's still people that are here in exploration. So read this for a second. What do you think this sounds like to you? Level 2. Rather than me tell you, what do you think, in your experience, what is level 2?
It sounds like a lot of things. Like I think from the teacher perspective, it's like maybe overwhelm and it's the sporadic lack of systematic approach. Like that resonates with me. Like I really do, but I didn't really have a hard and fast plan for how I was going to implement it. And the year just zooms by and it never becomes systematic. And so this Academy has been really helpful for that. Like, oh, okay, this is how it could become more systematic. But it also tells me something about like the school culture, that it may be like let's try this new thing, and then not providing support for teachers to continue. And that can be a challenge too for teachers who have that interest and want, but not the spaces to actually, share with one another, have PD around it, kind of struggle with it, but that there's, still school support before moving on to the next thing.
Thank you. An example of this, how many of y'all have like databases available to you at your campus that the district buys, or what I used to call high-tech drill and kill, where it's basically like a program where kids can go and do a bunch of math problems or a bunch of reading problems. Is that available still? I know that they're out there and that people are still using it. That is this level of that's level 2, where, and another level 2 can be where teachers start to use the technology a little bit more for the occasional PowerPoint. That's a teacher-led PowerPoint. It's, if anything, if there is integration, it's teacher-led. So students aren't leading it. Then here comes level 3, where we have some actual infusion, because I'm going to let you all read this and tell me what you guys think, and see where would you put yourself in the scales we've seen so far.
Well, being a computer science teacher, it's integrated in what we do. So that's what I was thinking in reading level 2 versus level 3 is there's a natural flow to use the technology, as opposed to here we're enforcing some piece of technology for to use, and it may be unclear about why you're using it. But in this level, it's and not the obvious is not quite right, but you got to use it. It's just the next thing. It's part of what we're doing. It's already a piece. It's not separate.
And by the way, Dr. Redfield, I looked your name up. I asked ChatGPT about you, and it told me where you taught and what you do. So yes, I would expect you to be at level 3 or above.
Yeah.
So yes, this is where, and level 3 is where actually students are themselves. Your expectation is that students are themselves engaging in presentations or even some collaborative projects, but it's beginning to be a little bit more student-led. There is one bit of difference here. The students may be acting and doing things, but there's still a lot of more of the teacher push such as this is what I give you an assignment, this, and you're gonna do this PowerPoint presentation, or you're going to do something about this particular topic. It's not yet student initiated. That's you see how it starts, and that's how it starts increasing from the teacher created, teacher led, to teacher assigned, to more student developed, student initiated. So that's how we start seeing the difference here. What I liked about the Lodi levels is that it gave our teachers a very good way of structuring their year, of structuring how they were going to roll out technology infused classes in whatever their subject area. So here, level 4, this more seamless integration. Students take an active role in using technology to explore, create, collaborate, and solve real world problems. What does that sound like to you? That sentence right there.
It sounds like project-based learning or problem-based learning.
Okay, I haven't sent you the $50 to say that for you to say.
100 now. I'm very excited about this.
You're like, I'm excited about the 100 because it's like, you already said 50 before. So yes, this is where you start seeing how all things that rise seem to converge. Here, all of these ideas about student-initiated, student-led, student-centered really start to converge here around technology. And here in this piece in technology, we're asking students to take that active role. And when I was doing this in the past, it was difficult for teachers at first to understand how this was going to work, because there was some limitations. It was from around 2002 to 2007. They didn't quite. There was some limitations about how they could do this, and then it started becoming more obvious how they could take the tools in front of them. So here, for example, one of the simplest things, let's say, if you had a project-based learning around even for 3rd and 4th graders, around say growing plants, and when remember the old seed experiment where you give them a little seed to grow, and you had taught them about using Excel, and the kids would actually start measuring and creating spreadsheets based on that. And that was a great way for them to present their ideas with a lot of push. I did this training a lot in Louisiana, and teachers were always shocked that when you showed all of your students these tools, that they could come up with these ideas themselves. So you had students creating graphs with Excel in 4th grade on bean growth, and then they would roll out the year, creating those. Remember the old experiments about putting music next to them and all of that. But at 4th grade, I was really surprised that not surprised, I was just pleased that our students that were doing that. I think the teachers were really shocked that their students were doing this, but it was just fantastic because all you had to do was kind of give them the tools, and they themselves wanted to extend this and do these work themselves. So this leads, so how much better could it get than this? You're like, so how much better could it get? And here is the expansion to, and I remember very well in 2005 doing this, talking to them about expansion and saying, well, you can take any sort of information, any of these sorts of lessons, and try to create those projects that you're doing, and trying to put them out on the internet for others to react to it. And back then, all they really had were blogs. So kids were putting out stuff in blogs about experiments that they were doing and hoping that somebody would come in and talk to them about it. Well, it was all about extending out to other experts. So what ended up happening right there at that particular point is that teachers would bring in experts from across the world to come and talk to their students at that point, just through Skype, to talk about their projects so they could share with us. And these were elementary school students. So I remember one was an apple orchard that was part of a university experiment, and these 4th graders in Louisiana were going back and forth with them about these apples and experiments that these excuse me, these biologists were doing. And it was just really fabulous because it was real-time communication with experts. Then YouTube came out, and suddenly all of this became much easier to do. The expansion became much easier to do, and you saw students doing this a lot more with a lot more intentionality. What is happening right now that students actually do this, are doing this particular kind of work on a regular basis? What can you think of?
The question was, where are students doing this on a regular basis?
Well, different social media platforms.
Yes, one in particular.
TikTok.
Yes. And it's a lot about, right now, it's a lot about politics. You see a lot of students, high school students and junior high students talking about politics on TikTok with very sophisticated ideas and using TikTok as a way to communicate about these ideas. It's when I saw it, there's times when you go on TikTok and you do lose a little bit of your concern about the state of the world because some of the things you see on there. But then there's a whole bunch of things that are amazing that students are doing, and it's exactly what's going on here. What Dr. Mershad predicted could happen. How could it get better? Level 6 is refining all this. Now, taking all of these things where you've created these projects, you've put them online, you've talked to others, you've made these connections, and you do all this in order to make data-informed decisions. The students themselves can make data-informed decisions, and teachers can then adapt what they're doing to maximize learning outcomes. In other words, here in the case of artificial intelligence is, yes, we will try to adopt this to maximize learning outcomes but using all of the data that we can given some of the ideas that we gave you today, these past few days. I think this is where we're going to start feeling a little bit. I start feeling a little bit. I don't want to be a Pollyanna about ChatGPT and about some of the things that are happening. Obviously, like we've talked about, there are some real issues. But here, when we talk about this refinement, we're not at those lower levels anymore. Students are coming at us with a capacity to some extent to do the expansion work. I mean, most definitely. So go back, not level out. I want to go back. Definitely integration and excuse me, and expansion. They're coming at us with the ability to do that. And now with this refinement work, it's going to take a lot of us as educators guiding and having dialogue with our students about what this means. It's not going to be easy. I think 15 years ago, when I was doing a lot of this work, I would be very disappointed when teachers just didn't want to jump on board. But it's a different world today. I think teachers are willing to jump on board with everything else that I've talked about. But we've come to this place where we are right now, where we're going to have a lot more hesitation, and I don't blame teachers for that. I don't blame them. In the past, I think I was a little bit harsh on our profession because I was worried that just teachers didn't want to try those other pieces. But right now, it's a little bit different. I can see why some people have some hesitation. Yes.
I can say that I think it's really interesting. The progression of this also matches like pedagogical progressions, right? Like in all of our criteria for great teaching, like the best teachers are at the refinement level. So as we become better teachers, whether it's low tech or high tech, some of these skills are still, part of our professional development as teachers. So I just wanted to, I think that there is this convergence in just how we improve in the profession over our careers.
Exactly. I think that's the way you talked about, the way you just said that's very true. I was when I saw this scale, it made me hopeful that teachers, and especially teachers that were newer to the profession, would be able to see chart their own professional growth and the ideas that we were taught. Everything from when we started, even with the most basic of Bloom's taxonomy, which guided us for many years, to everything Dr. Banks and Dr. Ladson-Billings have been talking about the past, actually since the 90s, and it's just really come into real implementation the past 20 years, regardless of what's happening across the states. It's still there. And you all know what I'm talking about, Dr. Ladson-Billings, with culturally relevant pedagogy in the way she describes, and also Dr. Banks in the way he described a lot of this work as well. So it's all, I think, very parallel. Now, there is one more level, which was transformation. And basically, transformation is really where everything the students become self-directed learners and contribute to their learning communities. That's something that has always been our. We always talk about that thing as being our goal, that students are self-directed learners, and all aided by technology, and now obviously through social media. There is a lot of in technology. I want to say for at least the past 30 years, there's already been a lot of work where students and youth who were interested in technology were self-directed learners and contributed to technology learning communities through all sorts of, this is how some things got developed that we use on a regular basis in technology. There's this operating system called Linux, and I remember in the late 90s and early 2000s that was the hot thing that all of the cool nerd kids were doing Linux work. And there was all sorts of things that you would see popping up all the time, new little pieces of software. And when you saw the average age of kids that were involved with that, it was sometimes 15 years old. I was shocked. I went to a conference once. It's a conference called DEF CON. I don't know if y'all ever heard of DEF CON. Did you ever go, Dr. Redfield? Did you ever go, Agichi?
No. I've not gone.
Well, I'm sure I'm on some government watch list because I went. It's a hacker conference, and I thought I was pretty good in technology. And what I saw and this was 20 years ago, and what I saw the kids doing was just, I was floored. And it was because they had built these. They were self-directed learners, and they contributed to their learning community. I saw, the one thing that blew my mind is there were in one big conference hall, there were 10 tables, and these tables had these groups of kids at each table, and there was this one giant pagoda in the middle of these 7 tables, and you would see at these 7 tables, at the giant pagoda, the screens that were there, these karate figures, animations, that were basically beating each other up. And I thought, well, they're playing a game. But then I got near them, and that's not what they were doing. They were trying to hack into the server that pagoda represented. And the kids that were doing this around the tables were all on just a command line doing all of these attacks. But the pagoda in the middle, I was wondering, it's like, well, that must have been some company that created this pagoda so the kids could play this. No, it was a 15-year-old kid that had created this this screen, so where every time that the server was hit and broken into, it would simulate this karate chop. And I talked to the kid, and I was just so floored. The kid was 15 years old. So the capacity of our students to do this is obviously within them. And what technology has allowed us to see is identify that our students are able to do this, and that we can tap into this for all sorts of other parts of our learning. Now, I wanted to stop there because that's a lot I used to do a training on this particular piece over a 2-day period, so teachers could come up and see what kind of plans they could do for their year. But in this case, I think it's good for us to kind of end at least this part of our conversations, having introduced this, so you can have a framework another framework with which to see how how ChatGPT and all of these other artificial intelligence and machine learning tools are going to help you, or can help you. It's a lot to take in. It really is a lot to take in, but we're at a place. I'm not going to be like I used to be, where I was a total cheerleader all the for the technology, because I've seen that where it could go awry, and I'm very sympathetic to that. And at the same time, I want to be able to be of service and help to our students, because, like I said, my biggest fear is that the students who are going to lose out are students who underrepresented, students who are seen as not really interested in any of this, or who are just not who teachers are going to think in some cases, because of the behaviors, that they're just going to use this to cheat. No, we have to be able to have those really open conversations with them. And hopefully everything that we've talked about today, this past 3 days, will help you start those conversations with your students. And in some cases, I think it's the conversations with your districts, because some districts, are shutting things down, period, and just not having the conversations yet. And we will be very happy to help you have conversations with districts if you want us to help you talk to them. Any thoughts and questions about this so far that y'all have? I'd like to give y'all some time to just kind of mull over it.
So even though I'm a high-tech person, sometimes when we get a new tool, better improved tool to do something at the university, it's like, oh God, another tool. The thing is, sometimes it's not a better tool, so it's really frustrating, but sometimes it is a better tool. So I know this idea of kind of tool hopping around and paying for big tools in technology. Sometimes I wonder really if it is the best decision, that was made, and if you're always buying the lower end of something, does it really get you what you want? You're probably going to lose capability along with gain capability. So that's what I think about some of our technology solutions, let's say.
I would say to that, I would be curious what the institution, or even like districts for me, have as their decision-making criteria, like sort of like the Bill of Rights. What is it that actually guides your thinking about it? And are you putting that through the filter? And as that guide needs to change, is that changing as well as we learn new things? Because that really has I think a negative impact on like teacher morale and staff morale, and whenever we make poor decisions, or not evidence-based decisions, and sort of like snub the whole idea of design thinking, or just making iterations better when we make those poor decisions. So,
Dr. Bill, anything you'd like to add to that? I was going to say something. Anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, one would think a Catholic university who's been around a long time would be better at doing what you said, but we're not. Anyway, sometimes faculty are involved and sometimes not. I really like it when faculty are involved, right? Having faculty part of the decision process always seems to be better for students and faculty. Having students involved in decisions, I've not seen that happen. I founded a charter school where I made sure that did happen. So all the constituents being represented in decision-making process, I love that. I'm a Quaker too, so we tend to do more consensus things anyway.
I thank you. I would add a couple of things to that. One, the case with ChatGPT is it feels like, to some of us who have been around looking at this in this technology world, it feels very much like the beginnings in the 90s when we first jumped on the internet bandwagon. It feels very much like that. It also feels, honestly, it also feels like when Google first burst on the scene. And it was a vast improvement over, say, web crawler and Yahoo and some of the old search engines. And it was adopted by a lot of people immediately, very quickly. And then we were playing catch up to those. We spent a lot of time playing catch up as educators. So it feels like that. Whether it is going to be like that and it's going to have the same sort of legs, we're not sure. I mean, there's a lot of things that we're not sure about. One, the company itself, OpenAI, who's working on this and who hosts all this, they're running into problems that they're realizing that there's a lot of CPU and computer use that it takes to just do one of these prompts. It's not super easy. It's not like a query. It's not like a query on Google. That's not, that doesn't put a lot of stress on those computers. These prompts put stress on their CPUs and on their banks of computers, and that means money. So they're spending a lot of money trying to expand that. So there's that. I think that's something that we don't know how that's going to turn out. We don't know how some of this. They themselves are having some conversations internally about what all of this information concentrated in one place, in the way it's concentrated, how that is different from, say, Google's the way Google has concentrated data. This is different. This is way different. This is, people, imagine if everybody starts asking questions and not being very careful about the privacy issues. You're suddenly going to have a lot more data that is stored somewhere and actively being used a part of the learning, so then could be queried. And that's a different story than they just having cookies around, for your ads. That's different. My nightmare scenario is I'm gonna one of these days I'm gonna I'm gonna chat GPT and ask, so what do you think Hector Bojorquez is likely to do today after what you've seen from him? And it's not far-fetched.
It's not. In the late 90s, early 2000s, when I taught computer literacy and taught about search engines, I would have students search their name. And this is a true story. There was one woman one year who found a pornographic website about her that her ex-husband had put up.
Oh, dear Lord.
Yeah. In class, but yeah.
Oh,
so
dear.
Those things happen.
Oh, dear. That is disturbing.
Yeah.
And this is a little bit in a different direction. I can say this because I finished the survey. There's not just challenges as a middle school social studies teacher, and I'm not a computer science teacher or a tech teacher, or we're at a STEM school, and so there's a STEM class. But I do want my kids to have these tools, and I think about, like, when do I want to use the Chromebook, and I'm thinking I want to use the device when we're teaching skills, and so every time they use it, it's purposeful, and they can connect, like, using this device with, okay, academic work in a way, and you have to follow these instructions, and we're going to go over them, but we're engaging actively, versus what I have been doing, like, okay, you have your device, whatever, it's, let's do some research on this in independent practice, but closely associating device use for now, because they're 12 and 13, with learning a new skill and then applying that skill, like we're doing here. I feel like, oh, my tabs are all filled with the different resources, right? Okay, now bookmark this. Now, how can we access this again? And that's kind of helping me kind of frame how I can incorporate it, because another challenge when we think about, like, talking to our districts and also to our professional learning communities and academic coaches is, how do we evaluate teachers? If we're evaluating teachers for cultural responsiveness versus, scores, are we evaluating teachers for, what skills they're actually teaching their kids? And how is that reflected in our data meetings? And if it's, for me in social studies, it's very content heavy versus skills, how can we shift the balance of that? Or have more flexibility, so I'm not always fighting with the pacing guide to actually teach students skills that they can actually use.
And you've mentioned a lot of what you just said right now. strikes me as that what you're going to have me saying, there's this really positive thing about this, and then there's this possibly negative thing. So I'm going to go to the positive first. Possibly positive. When we are going to sit down and have intentional discussions with our students about the use, and let them know that we're going to expect you to send us what your discussion looked like. Like right there with like the link you sent me, and we asked, you will be able to see, it's like to kind of quantify. It's like, well, these are the kind of questions you are asking, and actually grade, or not even grade, but suggest more on the types of questions they're asking rather than the result. Because if then we prioritize and incentivize deeper questions, then we're getting a glimpse into that, because it's something that we never did before. We are always about the answer. And if this one, we deprioritize the answer in this sense and say, this lets us see how you're thinking about this, and we can then give you ideas about how to have deeper discussions about this. And then even take that same kind of those same kind of discussions and bring them obviously into the real world with real people. And as my nerd people say, IRL, in real life.
Yeah. I think you're raising a great point about how we evaluate our students. And by doing that, we can then take that to our academic coaches and to our APs and say, look, this is metacognition, or this is, these are evidence-based practices. This is what I'm trying to do here, as a stronger argument for that process.